Get ready, because today we're going to talk about 5 of the worst mistakes that writers make when it comes to editing and revising. By the way, my name is Brandon McNulty. I'm the author of Bad Parts, also the author of Entry Wounds, and welcome to my writing channel. Some of my subscribers asked me to do a video on the topic of editing, and what I have planned for today, I want to talk about 5 of the biggest mistakes that writers make when it comes to revising and editing their stories. And I also want to give you some practical tips for not only avoiding these mistakes, but also overcoming them. But first off, real quick, I want to define what revising and editing are. They often overlap with each other, and they will in today's video, but I just want to make it clear that these are 2 different stages in the process of improving your story. First you draft a story, then you revise, and then you edit. And revising, what it is, it's making large-scale changes. You're reworking and reimagining your story's content. That might include the plot, subplots, character development, themes, and so on. Now, editing is making small-scale changes to your story. You'll rework and correct the finer details in your story in order to improve its overall clarity, consistency, quality, and readability. And as I mentioned, revising and editing often overlap with each other, and sometimes you can't do one without also doing the other. But ideally, you want to make revisions before you make edits. Alright, now let's get to the 5 mistakes. And the first mistake is being unwilling to make any changes. And a lot of writers, once they finish their first draft, they fall in love with it, and they can't picture their story playing out any other way. Even when beta readers point out major issues with the structure or the character development or whatever it is, these writers will still cling to their original vision, and they will not compromise on anything other than maybe fixing a typo or some other minor sentence level issue. And the solution here, first off, you gotta accept that your first draft won't be perfect. It's nothing to be ashamed of, and in fact, you should be excited about the opportunity to improve it. And once you realize that, you need to read through your story and note the points where you lose interest. Remember, if you're bored by your own story, your audience will be too. So figure out why you're losing interest. Is there a lack of conflict? Are the characters shallow and predictable? Does the plot not make sense? Is the writing itself sloppy? Try to fix any issues and then seek feedback and take that feedback into consideration as you continue to improve your story. Mistake number 2, ignoring the big picture. And this means that you zero in on the small scale changes. Sometimes I do this when I'm reading through my story. I'll get like midway through and I'll start a chapter and I'll edit the first page of a chapter and I'll really polish it up and make it snap, and it'll just be an excellent first page. Then I'll read a few more pages into the story and I'll realize, you know what? I actually need to start that scene later. I need to cut that first page. So all that effort I put into polishing up that first page goes completely to waste. You don't want this. And the solution here is to revise big before you edit small. And once you finish drafting a story, here's a 3-step process you can go through. You'll need to read your story through 3 times, but on the first read through, cut everything that you can. Everything you don't need, cut it out. Then on the second read through, revise everything that needs fixing. And then on the third read through, one more time you're going to go through it, and this time you're going to polish things up. You're going to worry about the sentence level stuff. Cut, revise, polish. Third mistake is the butterfly effect. And this is when you edit a scene, a moment, a detail, a single word, and then all of a sudden you have to make changes all over your manuscript. You have to do everything you possibly can to balance things out and make sure that there's no inconsistency going on in your story. And the thing is, once you make one change, then it forces you to make another change, which forces you to make another one on top of it, and you're changing and changing and changing until you lose your mind. Now, as for the solution, this one is tough because you do have to address inconsistencies in order to keep your story believable. Now, that being said, one strategy that helps is to edit your story from back to front. This means that you should finalize the last quarter of your story first. Set that in stone, then edit the third quarter of your story, then the second quarter, and finally the first quarter. And I suggest trying this method because it's easier to keep things under control if your ending is rock solid. That way you have a clear target that the rest of the story can aim for. And I did a video on this strategy a while back. If you want to take a look, I'll link it at the top of the screen as well as in the description below. Fourth mistake, adding content instead of cutting. Now, I already talked about how when you have a first draft, you want to cut it down. For instance, if you have 100 scenes in your story, try cutting it down to 90 scenes, or even 85, or as few as you can get. Because when you're cutting material from your story, that means that you're getting rid of filler and you're tightening up your story's pacing, and that's what you want. Now, on the other hand, many writers make the mistake of adding extra content onto their first draft. Sometimes they say things like, oh, you know what, my story isn't funny enough. I think I'll include a humorous scene there just for laughs or just to lighten things up a bit. And oftentimes all it does is just add some excess words. And you don't want to do that. You only want to add content to your story if it's absolutely necessary. And that brings us to our solution. Only add new material as a last resort. Remember, you're better off developing your story from within rather than adding new stuff on top. So if you feel like your story isn't funny enough, don't add a new funny scene. Instead, make one of your existing scenes funny. See if you can revise what you already have there. And it may also help if you think of your finished draft as a puzzle that has all its pieces. Try rearranging them into a better story that works. If something is clearly missing, then by all means add it, but only after cutting and revising. And then the fifth mistake is endless editing. And this can happen for a variety of reasons. Sometimes you have that butterfly effect that I mentioned where you change one thing and then you have to change another and another and another and another and it just keeps going. Other times you have a situation where you become obsessed with perfectionism and you can't get out of the editing cycle. And then still you might have situations where you're just being fearful. You're afraid of your book getting critiqued. You're afraid what other people would think if it's not as good as it can possibly be. And you just keep editing and editing and editing until the end of time. And the solution here is this. You need to embrace the idea that your work can be improved. Fix the story's major problems, then polish it. But remember, your story doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be clear and readable. And once it makes sense, send it to people for feedback. And also, set realistic deadlines for yourself. Maybe once you finish making large-scale revisions, challenge yourself to finish editing within 2 weeks or 2 months or whatever timetable works for you. But the important thing is this. You want to view the editing process as something that needs to end as soon as possible. The sooner you finish editing, the sooner you can get feedback and make necessary adjustments. Eventually, you should hit a point where you prepare your story for publication, or if the story isn't working, you move on to a new story. Either way is fine as long as you keep making an honest effort to move forward. So I hope this helps. Question of the day, what is the biggest editing mistake that you have made? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching. If you want to support the channel, please pick up a copy of either one of my books and be sure to leave reviews on Amazon. Bad Parts is great if you like small town horror. It's about people trading away their sick and injured body parts in order to get healthy again. And then Entry Wounds is great if you like thrillers. It's about a guy who picks up a haunted gun and he can't put it down till he kills 6 people with it. Also, be sure to check out my other videos, like, share, and subscribe. And as always, remember to keep on writing.